The old house stood at the end of Sleepy Hollow Lane, shrouded in shadows. It was a looming silhouette against the bruised twilight sky. A rusted gate creaked like a mournful sigh, its hinges groaning in protest. Within those crumbling walls, 3 teenagers were about to tempt fate. Steph, Lindsey, and Jay. Their names, ordinary, their laughter soon to be silenced. Steph, with her jet-black hair and eyes that glittered like obsidian, was drawn to the darkness. Lindsey, all blonde curls and nervous energy, clung to Jay's arm. Jay, athletic and cocky, with a bravado he didn't truly feel, tried to mask his unease. The old house seemed to watch their every move, its empty windows like vacant eyes. Friday the 13th. A night for legends, for whispers of the unknown. A night for summoning spirits. At least, that's what the teenagers had decided. Armed with a dusty Ouija board and youthful curiosity, they sought to pierce the veil between worlds.
I don't know about this, guys. It feels wrong.
Don't worry, Lindsey. It's just a game. Nothing's gonna happen.
Lindsey, ever the superstitious one, chewed on her lip, her blue eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. Jay, ever the protector, squeezed her hand reassuringly, his confidence a flimsy shield against the growing darkness.
Come on, let's do this. What's the worst that could happen?
Steph, the daredevil of the group, relished the fear that clung to them like cobwebs. She yearned for something more, something beyond the mundane. The Ouija board, with its strange symbols and otherworldly promise, whispered to her deepest desires. Little did they realize the board was listening, it was waiting, and it was hungry. The Ouija board lay on the floor, an innocuous-looking piece of polished wood. But beneath its surface, a darkness pulsed. A gateway, waiting to be unlocked. The teenagers gathered around it, their shadows stretching long and distorted in the flickering candlelight. The air grew heavy, charged with an unseen energy.
Okay, everyone, fingers on the planchette. Let's see if there's anyone here with us.
With trembling fingers, they placed their fingertips on the planchette. The smooth, cold surface sent a shiver down their spines. A shared breath, a whispered question, and the game began.
Is anyone there?
Their words, innocent at first, hung in the air, heavy with unintended consequences. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting, watching, and then it answered. The air hung heavy with anticipation. The faint scent of lavender did little to mask the musty odor of decay. Steph insisted on clearing a space in the middle of the dusty living room.
Let's move this stuff out of the way. We need space for the séance.
Lindsey helped to push aside a moth-eaten armchair.
This place gives me the creeps. Are you sure about this?
Just stay close. I've got a bad feeling too.
Jay, ever watchful, scanned the shadowy corners, feeling they were being watched. Steph produced a handful of candles from her backpack, thick white pillars and slender crimson tapers. She placed them strategically around the room, their flickering flames casting long, dancing shadows that stretched and contorted like phantoms.
There, that should do it.
The room, bathed in the warm glow of candlelight, took on a surreal, almost ethereal quality. Lindsey shivered, pulling her cardigan tightly around her.
I could have sworn I saw a face peering out at me from the darkness beneath the grand staircase.
It's just the wind, Lynn. Old houses are drafty, that's all.
But even Jay couldn't entirely shake the feeling that something was amiss. The air seemed thick with unseen energy, charged with a palpable sense of dread. Steph unfolded the Ouija board with reverence. The polished wood gleamed in the candlelight, the mystical symbols and letters seeming to glow with an inner light. It was a thing of both beauty and terror, a portal to the unknown. They arranged themselves around the board, forming a circle of fear. Lindsey and Jay sat opposite each other, their knees almost touching.
All right, everyone ready?
Steph, taking the role of the medium, positioned herself at the top of the circle, her fingers hovering over the planchette. Her heart pounded in her chest, a frantic tattoo against her ribs. A nervous giggle escaped Lindsey's lips, but it was quickly swallowed by the oppressive silence that descended upon them. The only sound was the crackling of the candles and the frantic beating of their hearts.
This is This is kind of intense, isn't it?
Yeah, but we've come this far. Let's see where it takes us.
Is anyone there?
Steph's voice, usually so confident, wavered slightly in the stillness. The question hung in the air, unanswered, for what seemed like an eternity. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the planchette began to move.
Oh my God.
Lindsey gasped, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a scream. Jay's eyes widened in disbelief as the planchette glided across the board, seemingly of its own accord.
This can't be real.
It darted back and forth, pausing briefly on each letter, spelling out a chilling message. YOUSHOULDN TBEHERE. Silence, heavy expectant silence. The message hung in the air between them, a tangible thing, a threat. Lindsey's eyes welled with tears, her hand tightening convulsively around Jay's. He, in turn, stared at the board, his bravado crumbling in the face of the unknown.
Who are you?
Who are you?
Her fingers, still resting lightly on the planchette, tingled with a strange energy. The planchette shuddered, then began to move again. It spelled out a single word, Zoe. A cold draft snaked through the room, chilling them to the bone. The candles flickered wildly, their flames dancing and spouting as if caught in a sudden wind. But there were no windows open, no drafts to speak of. The temperature plummeted, the air growing thick and heavy with a cloying floral scent, the scent of decay. Jay wrapped his arm protectively around her, his heart pounding against his ribs. Even Steph, her usual skepticism shaken, couldn't deny the feeling of dread that now permeated the room. The unseen presence made itself known, not with a bang, but with a whisper.
Zoe, who are you, Zoe? Why are you here?
The planchette trembled, its movements frantic now, as if the entity on the other side was agitated by their questions. It spelled out a series of letters, jumbled and incoherent at first, then forming a chillingly clear response.
Trapped.
The word hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken horrors. Trapped. The thought sent a shiver down their spines. Lindsey, overcome with fear, began to cry softly. Her tears, warm against Jay's neck, did nothing to dispel the icy grip of terror that tightened around his heart. As if in answer to their unspoken question, the room erupted in chaos. A vase, perched precariously on the mantelpiece, shattered against the wall, sending shards of porcelain flying like deadly projectiles. A heavy book flew from the nearby shelf, narrowly missing Steph's head before landing with a thud on the floor. The candles sputtered and died, plunging the room into darkness.
Oh my God.
Screams filled the air, high-pitched and terrified. Lindsey scrambled back, tripping over the Ouija board in her haste to escape the unseen force that now held the room captive. In the darkness, punctuated only by the frantic gasps for air and the pounding of their hearts, the unseen entity made its presence known. The darkness was suffocating, a black void that pressed in on them, stealing their breath and amplifying their terror. Lindsey's whimpers turned into sobs, her body trembling uncontrollably. Jay, unable to see, reached out blindly, his hand closing over hers in a desperate attempt to offer comfort.
Steph, what do we do?
His voice, usually so confident, was a choked whisper, barely audible above the frantic thumping of his heart. But Steph was silent. She sat frozen, her fingers still resting lightly on the planchette, her mind reeling from the sudden onslaught of terror. A low growl seemed to emanate from the very walls of the house, vibrating through their bones. The air grew thick with the smell of sulfur, acrid and choking. An unseen force slammed against the walls, shaking the very foundation of the old house. Jay pulled Lindsey closer, shielding her body with his own. He could feel her trembling against him, her fear a palpable thing. His mind raced, desperate for a solution, a way out of the nightmare that had ensnared them.
Jay, I'm so scared.
But there was no escape. They were trapped, caught in a web of their own making.
Zoe, we didn't mean to disturb you. We're sorry. Please let us go.
The growling stopped. A tense silence descended upon the room, broken only by the sound of their ragged breathing. Then a voice, cold and ethereal, whispered in their ears.
You should not have come here.
The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, echoing around them, seeping into their very bones. It was a voice devoid of any warmth, any humanity. A voice that spoke of unimaginable power and ancient, unyielding anger.
We didn't know. Please, we just want to go home.
A cold laugh echoed through the darkness, sending shivers down their spines. It was a cruel, mocking sound that sent a fresh wave of terror washing over them.
There is no going back. You have opened the door, and now it cannot be closed.
The unseen entity, Zoe, had spoken, and its words hung in the air between them, a death knell for their hopes of escape. They were trapped, at the mercy of a force beyond their comprehension. The game, once a source of amusement, had turned into a deadly game of cat and mouse. Claustrophobia seized them. The room, once a sanctuary of youthful curiosity, had become a prison of their own making. Panic welled up in their throats, choking back any coherent thought.
We have to say goodbye. We have to end the game.
Jay, desperate to regain control, groped blindly in the darkness for the Ouija board. Lindsey, her body racked with sobs, could only nod in agreement. Steph, her skepticism shattered, found herself whispering a desperate prayer. But the darkness offered no solace, no comfort. Only the oppressive weight of Zoe's presence, cold and menacing, a constant reminder of their predicament.
Jay's hand closed around the smooth, cold surface of the planchette. It vibrated beneath his touch, a low hum that resonated deep within his bones. With trembling fingers, he guided the planchette to the goodbye inscribed on the board. But as soon as he did, the room erupted in a cacophony of sound. A deafening roar split the silence, shaking the very foundation of the old house. The air crackled with energy, a visible current arcing between the planchette and the board.
Lindsey screamed, burying her face against Jay's chest.
Steph watched in horrified fascination as the planchette spun wildly, out of control, its movements no longer guided by human hands. And then, as quickly as it began, the chaos ceased. Silence descended upon the room once more, but it was a different kind of silence, heavier, more oppressive. The air thrummed with an unseen energy, a palpable tension that made their skin crawl. In the center of the room where the Ouija board lay discarded, a faint glow appeared. It pulsed and shimmered, casting eerie shadows that danced and writhed on the surrounding walls. The glow intensified, resolving itself into a swirling vortex of light, a doorway.
Lindsey whimpered, her grip tightening on Jay's arm.
Steph, her heart pounding in her chest, felt a primal fear grip her. It was the fear of the unknown, the fear of something ancient and powerful, something that defied all rational explanation.
The doorway pulsed, beckoning them closer. From its depths, they could feel Zoe's presence. No longer a disembodied voice, no longer a whisper in the darkness, but something tangible, something real. The air grew heavy with the scent of decay, a cloying sweetness that turned their stomachs. They wanted to run, to flee from the house, from the nightmare that had unfolded before their very eyes. But their legs felt like lead, their bodies rooted to the spot in terror. The doorway was not an escape. It was an entrance, a portal to a realm they were never meant to see, a realm where the rules of reality no longer applied. They were trapped, not just within the confines of the old house, but within the clutches of a force far beyond their comprehension. Zoe was waiting, and she had plans for them. The air crackled with static, every hair on their bodies standing on end, the swirling vortex, now a blinding beacon in the pitch-black room, pulsed with an energy that seemed to suck the air from their lungs.
Oh my God.
Wispy tendrils of smoke coalesced, forming a ghastly, undefined figure. It flickered and wavered, like a flame struggling to stay lit.
I can't look.
Stay behind me, Lindsey.
As the figure solidified, details began to emerge. Long black hair, matted and tangled, cascaded down its back. A white dress, ripped and stained, clung to its emaciated frame. And then, the face. Pale, gaunt, with eyes that burned with an eerie, otherworldly light.
No, it can't be.
Lindsey gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She knew that face. It was Zoe, but not the Zoe they saw in the faded photographs. This Zoe was different, twisted, consumed by rage.
It's Zoe, but not like this.
We need to get out of here now.
You, Zoe's voice, cold and hollow, echoed through the room, amplified by the unnatural stillness.
You called me.
Her spectral hand, the flesh translucent, bones visible beneath the skin, reached out towards Lindsey. Terror choked Lindsey's words. She wanted to scream, to run, to do anything to escape the spectral figure that stood before her. But her body refused to obey. She was frozen, caught in the grip of a terror she had never known.
Please, no.
100 years, Zoe hissed, her voice a low growl that seemed to claw at the edges of their sanity.
100 years I have been trapped in this prison of stone and wood.
Her eyes, burning with an eerie light, swept around the room, taking in the dust-covered furniture, the peeling wallpaper, the air thick with the stench of decay.
We have to do something!
But what? What can we do?
The room seemed to close in around them, the walls whispering secrets of 100 years of torment and despair.
He promised me forever, but forever became a cage, a tomb.
Her spectral hand balled into a fist, the anger radiating off her in waves.
He betrayed you.
Steph's voice was barely a whisper, the pieces of the local legend slotting into place. Zoe, the young bride, left at the altar, driven to madness by her grief. She had hung herself in this very room, her spirit forever bound to the house where her dreams had turned to dust.
He will pay, and you will help me.
The room seemed to shrink, the air growing thin and cold. The temperature plummeted, a bone-chilling cold that seeped into their very marrow. Lindsey, her eyes wide with terror, understood. Zoe wasn't just there to share her pain, to tell her tale. She was there to collect.
No!
Jay's scream echoed through the room, a primal sound born of fear and desperation. He threw himself at Zoe, his hands passing through her spectral form as if she was smoke. The air crackled with energy, a visible shockwave rippling outwards from the point of contact. But Zoe didn't even flinch.
He took my life. Now I will take his. And you will help me.
Her eyes, burning with an eerie, otherworldly light, fixed on Lindsey. Zoe leaned closer, her breath a cold wind against Lindsey's cheek. Lindsey's breath hitched in her throat. She understood. Zoe wasn't interested in Jay's soul. She wanted vengeance, and she wanted Lindsey to be her instrument, to deliver Jay to her, bound by terror and despair, a sacrifice to appease her centuries-old grudge. Lindsey closed her eyes, her mind a maelstrom of terror and a dawning, horrifying realization. She couldn't let Zoe take Jay. She couldn't. But what choice did she have? Zoe's power was undeniable, absolute. And then she remembered the words whispered by her grandmother, a woman who claimed to see things hidden from ordinary eyes.
Spirits feed on fear. They draw strength from it.
Lindsey took a step back, putting a little distance between herself and the spectral figure of Zoe. She drew a deep breath, filling her lungs with air, banishing the fear that threatened to consume her. She looked into Zoe's eyes, no longer with terror, but with a strange sense of pity. The police never believed their story. The fire, they said, was an electrical fault, a tragic accident. The old house on Sleepy Hollow Lane was reduced to ashes. But for Lindsey and Jay, the nightmare was far from over. They returned to their lives, but something had changed. A shadow clung to them, a constant reminder of the night they had tempted fate. Lindsey couldn't shake the feeling of Zoe's presence. Jay, once so sure of himself, now jumped at Shadows. He couldn't escape the memory of Zoe's rage. They had survived the Ouija board nightmare, but at a terrible cost.